All right, what we learned health related since last time. So I think we left off here, and so if you do the being with the pain and pressing down hard, right after that there's a little kind of taste that shows up, and if you hold on and ride that taste, you'll get a lot of pleasure in the gut, a lot more taste, and kind of a flattening of the gut, which is fantastic. This is probably the reason why we are down to getting better, right? 10.5 hours, only 1 p during night. This is kind of the quick smacking the tongue associated with taste that you get. Also not pushing it, so usually towards the end of the day, if you push a lot, your brain gets buzzed and you can't go on. It's kind of like, it's a very good thing. It's almost like a pump in the gym, but for your brain, and it's fantastic. But usually to get to that point, you really need to push yourself, and you can't really think afterwards, and you pretty much go to bed. And I didn't get to that. I've been getting to that on and off as of the making of this video, but didn't get to that quite here. And usually when you get there, you sleep more because you pushed yourself the day before. When you don't get there, you sleep less, so that could have something to do with it. Also, we humans are meant to grab things and push down on things with our arms, like hands, and feet specifically, not the side of your leg, your forearm. If you're using that to support yourself, chances are things are not going to go well, like shins. Again, the palms of your hands or the soles of your feet. What works best? We're gonna touch lightly on computer stuff just in case it helps you. So shell startup, if you put things in here to start normally, like scripts, like BAT scripts that then execute other Python files, it does take a bit to run once the computer starts up, and usually I noticed around 6 minutes. Also, if you're issuing bad chi out and taking in good chi, be wary of how much you can take in safely, because it does kind of move your body, jolts it, and your body's still your body, so you might hurt yourself if you do move a lot of chi at once very quickly. The OK button on the OneDrive, typically if you click it and it says an error, it's actually going in the background. You just need to wait. And so if you get 5 errors in a row, don't worry, it is working. In Teams, you can make things compact, and very similar to this, the more recent stuff is at the top. You can make alerts with full text instead of just Team A message you. You could say what it is. The camera has a lot of visual effects, like backgrounds, but you can actually make it paint your face younger, so it gets rid of the wrinkles via AI. You get delegated call groups, so those are people who can handle calls for you, as well as call forwarding, and they can call, which is really cool, your phone if you're, in case you're away from your computer, you don't have your computer around. Let's say you're walking around, you're outside, it can call your phone, so you don't miss a call, which is awesome. And there's obviously third-party app connections, including facial recognition and speech recognition, all in Microsoft Teams. While I'm there, there's a video someone posted about recording automatically for every meeting you set up. You would set up a meeting, record automatic is in the online Outlook option when you right click on the meeting and hit edit, and then you would just copy that meeting over. So that's pretty cool. So video games have awesome soundtracks, and don't forget to look at the DLCs if you're going to search for games. These are just some that we've been listening to. So the best is if you have limited storage space on your laptop, offload as much as you can to OneDrive in 2 folders, active and archives, so you can name it A and Z. Put everything at A, everything gets downloaded to A. No matter what you do on your computer, it goes to A. And then those 2 folders are always online, except when you're running out of space, and then you take archive offline. And so you would move the things from A to archive and take it offline, and then only it comes back online when you need to move more things. And that way you pretty much keep space to a minimum, only what you're using in A, maybe for a year, and then you shift it off. There's a way in SharePoint. So naming's important. So if you do the file name starting with your full date time, and then the title of maybe a project, and then some keywords, some tags, that's probably the best in terms of looking it up afterwards, and it auto sorts by date, which is pretty cool. And then here you have, if you have a SharePoint, you can actually use the Microsoft AI autofill, which if you specify these, and then in a quick blurb, these are the columns, and then in a quick blurb you specify how to get them, like search the text in the file and get everything that appears several times or is most important. For this, it might be the last modified date. For this, it might be what on last modified date was changed, things like that, and it can extract that, save them, and these are the 5 most important columns, and then you can query based off that. So you don't actually need any other folder than Z. I know that sounds really audacious, but if you're doing this, you can query by attributes, by name, which again you named it and it has some tags in there, and you can find any file without creating a single other folder. And probably better than you would and faster if you created folders. So Windows 11 File Explorer, if you go up to the left, it has options like show recent favorites, which are pretty useful. If you mess up the options, you can always restore defaults. And then whether it, when searching, wants to include zip files, which slow it down, but it's more comprehensive. And then also you have a compact view. You can show encrypted files or hide system files, and then show extension thumbnails, which I always do, and then expand all folders, which I don't because it's too much and it would overwhelm your system. So if you're sensitive to pain and you're thinking a lot, you might want to avoid people who peck your head or ask them not to do it. And then I'm only touching the things that can help others. So as far as you can do the SharePoint thing we talked about with Power Automate, it's a lot more manual and intensive. It really is. But you can set something up like that where you see a file coming in, you get all the things from the file, all the pretty much, it's almost like tags or columns from the file. They're very specific. You can then use Power Automate. There's certain flows that extract things from the file like text and then summarize it, and then you can update that metadata with Power Automate. If that's something you want to do because you can't access SharePoint, but chances are if you can't access one, you may not be able to access the other one in full capacity. So here, so the importance of reporting, as well as changing all your passwords, and then kind of doing damage control, which is part of changing all your passwords, reporting to minimize data breach, taking down anything you have online, offline pretty much, and then both of that. And if you're an auditor, same thing goes for any independence concerns. So it's just important overall as far as PCAOB SEC regulation goes. At any public accounting firm, you want to be very quick in reporting anything that even may be, if it's more so than not, in terms of an independence or a cyber breach. You want to report it to management, and they will troubleshoot. And usually, the earlier you report, damage control is maximized. So that's why, any way, shape, or form, you want to keep that on the front burner, so to speak. So certain things are not allowed by enterprises because, for instance, if there's open VPNs, AI hardware that can, as well as some web browsers and messengers, or anything that allows a connection to your computer, can be compromised. Since it's open source, you don't know exactly the code. It could be at any point in time compromised as you go. Now, open source usually is more transparent, and there are certain companies that collect much more than open source projects do, and the code is available, so you can look at it. But again, depends on which open source it is. There's a lot open source that do collect data, and so it's important to note that. In here, apparently a lot of web, maybe because it's built on the web, have a lot less functionality and a lot less access to your desktop. It's like in a sandbox container, usually, whether it's like Firefox, which does have dedicated sandbox containers. It can really limit the OS exposure. So that's probably why web apps are more allowed than desktop apps, which are on your computer, like OS specifically. So all this is, any organization you work for doesn't want to risk anything with authorities. So, and especially for accounting firms, they follow a very strict retention policy. So you want to make sure that any sort of data created can be retained for a long amount of time. Usually it's at least 7 years. And that's for you interacting with any organization, not only your own or the one you work for. It's others that work with you. And so if you can't do that, probably not allowed. Because again, if the authorities say, can you provide the data, and you can't, then it's gone, right? And then there's a fine, there's publicity. We don't want that. And usually the more centralized, the more secure, the more decentralized, that's more for risk hedging. So if you're traveling abroad in a sanctioned country, things like that, that's more where they'll siphon off of network, and kind of in the network compartmentalization structure, you can literally make a compartment for each user, not only their own main computer, but even a side computer for just going abroad. And that's pretty standard practice, just to limit risk in case that computer gets compromised abroad. Here, for spotting AI, these are all things that if increased, it makes it very spontaneous. And these are parameters. When decreased, it doesn't. So like in the coffee example, low, all of these usually mean how's the coffee? It's good. It's warm. If you do something with high, the AI will say like, oh my gosh, Buck and Bronco, it's incredible, like my first birthday, or something wild, and sometimes out of the blue and incoherent. And usually the AI looks for something in the middle, but you can usually spot AI because they're too, even with these parameters sort of high, they're too smooth. They don't have kind of jolts, pauses. Even the really good AI readers, still not quite there yet, even with these parameters high. But that's how you can spot. Yeah, so hopefully that helps. It's in order. So a lot of times Microsoft Copilot is advised by organizations and Microsoft in general, because of security, so they will restrict data from leaving that enterprise. Unlike other AI providers, like the big ones, ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, Perplexity, Gemini, they will use the data for training purposes a lot of times. So, and DeepSeek, for instance, will use some of that training data. And there were some reports that ChatGPT creates with your responses. So it's almost like a huge tree, but this keeps it very secure and kind of localized, so to speak. And it's cool because you can share it apparently with others, chats, and custom instructions are fine. You can do that for most AIs. Mainly confidentiality is the main one. So started laughing a lot. Some people say laughter yoga. This definitely does help. It honestly, if you are having food reactions, it can completely flip it. For me, this is fantastic. It also does something to learning, and kind of you're more loose, but then you try riskier things, and then you actually learn more, and you internalize easier, I find. So laughing is awesome, and it does help in doing other things like the all grips we talked about in earlier videos, as well as enjoying life, but simultaneously. So you can multitask almost easier. It's like streamlining or lowering the cost of doing many things at once seamlessly, and that's laughing, specifically laughing. And it helps when you're with another, because the natural laugh is much stronger, but it can be done alone. And it helps a lot too. For me, it's, and this might be noted above, but it's not only laughing, but it's also like side to side slow EMDR movements, and then breathing out like. So both of those really help take down, even though you may not seem stressed, it does do things, and you can notice in your digestion or other parasympathetic tone like symptoms almost that you wouldn't have. For instance, you might not feel stressed, but your stool say something else. A lot of times that slow EMDR, as well as the breathing out, helps tremendously with that. Whereas laughing is good, but it's not as strong as those two. And then again, we talked about that already. The Chi, watch it. It can be too much. So usually, again, going for the buzz we talked about earlier in the video, the brain buzz. When you get up to that point and you're feeling very tired, almost like after a long workout, and you don't think you can go anymore because of whatever symptoms you're experiencing, especially digestive. These things, by the way, did them all, didn't work. They all helped a little, didn't work. But this last one, this pleasure uptick on gut, so you pretty much focus around the gut. By focusing outside on reality and doing a like, it's almost like the same thing you do to get deeper in reality. You really enjoy it, you really take pleasure of it. Like, for instance, the camera, really enjoying how circular it is, how many circles there are, the fact someone even built that, like, that's freaking awesome, right? You would do the same thing, but once you do on your gut, and you go upwards, and it makes almost like a pleasure aura that automatically goes to where it needs to go to feel really, really good on the entire gut, anywhere from your mouth all the way down throat, stomach, gut, large, small, all of it. And it's great. It helped me get to the brain buzz that I probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise, so it helped above all these, at least for that day, which is awesome. Again, we did get to the brain buzz, so that goes to sleeping more hours and being a little bit more. We are starting FMD the day, so we started, and this would be, we'll get there, but it's the day after this day. Yeah, FMD tomorrow, so we flip down all the seeds, the things with a lot of protein and calories. And for autophagy versus growth, bottom line, if you're plant-based, we're going to cover that, is 0.12 grams per kilogram per meal, assuming 3 meals. So you're not going to exceed 0.36 grams per kilogram per day, which is not a lot. And so, especially if you're used to higher protein. And the reason for that, if you look, leucine is the main agonist for mTOR. mTOR is what you want to avoid for autophagy. Usually leucine for plants is 6 to 8.2%. Mostly a lot of the heavy hitters are around 8%, like these guys. And so the meat and animal scores, though, for PCDAAS, unlike these guys, which are in the 90 to 100 range, most plants are in the 40 to 80 range. Animal is 100 to 140 range, and leucine hovers to 8 to 11%. So you're really getting a very added percentage, which is why probably cancers are much higher in animals, because you're doubling up, right? Higher leucine, higher PCDAAS, so your amino acid score usage in your body is higher. Those two are like double stacking, and that multiplier effect, if you're adjusting for plant-based protein, because here in animal it's around this is 0.8 grams per kilograms. You have to stay below this for autophagy. So for plants, it's at least probably a little higher than 0.12 grams per kilogram, but you want to stay under that per meal, assuming 3 meals. And then if you want to go for growth, you want to target 0.55 grams per kilogram, because based on the studies, 0.4 gram per kilogram per meal is the most, even in animal-based proteins, that you would ever need. Even like older individuals, it does not generate greater MPS or greater mTOR, so that muscle protein synthesis. And so pretty much this is the cap. So this is growth, this is autophagy, and for autophagy you want to get the meals really in like a 4.5 window. If you're eating 3, less is better. If 23-1 if you can. For growth, you want to spread them out, probably at 3 hours spread apart each, so maybe 9 hours. Still get some of the intermittent fasting benefits, but you're also getting the perfect spikes. Interesting to note, if you spread them out even more, like 6 hours apart, it's actually less beneficial. So there's something about like riding a wave in a rhythmic manner here, which aligns with our circadian, because 9 hours in most places that would have been the sun is up, you're eating. Something to do with that evolutionarily. That's pretty much it. And again, yeah, that's pretty much that. So spermidine is still high in other things like fermented red lentils, chickpeas, not as high as in soy. Soy is like 20 units, chickpeas might be 10. Most beans or legumes are in the 2 to 10 range, so you're still getting a lot more than most animal foods if they're fermented. Urolithin A, the best way is if you do a half lacto ferment with pomegranates and half wine and vinegar ferment, and then you taste along the way. Again, that's just based on how ancient cultures did it, to actually produce urolithin A and get the microbes necessary to produce that from the precursors. So that's a sure shot. Even taking just the probiotic, Gordonobacter, still did not produce urolithin A, and it did not colonize So you want to do this to get the whole microbial. It is a biome, like that complex assortment, to make sure you have all the building blocks to make it. So this is the highest chance. And then, so if you introduce feces into your body, either way, but usually orally, and a lot of animals do it, it's called coprophagia, and this is geophagia. This is the only way we know currently that there can be microbiome colonization maximization. Unlike probiotics, which might be a pill, might work for some people, feces having the full microbiome in there, and we're talking, if a probiotic had maybe 20 species, some of the best have 34, feces has thousands. And not only that, there's a lot of families in there, and you get the full pipeline for a lot of the nutrient breakdowns and benefits, like short chain fatty acids, things like that. So if you ingest that from another animal, and that's what a lot of animals do when they're sick, they go to a healthy one and they ingest it and then they get better. For instance, rabbits, the young rabbits need to eat from a healthy mother, the feces, to pretty much make it. So there's a lot of animals that practice this, especially when they're sick. In humans, they've been introducing this especially for gastrointestinal, so they pre-screen it, and that seems to be the best. If you can't get a pre-screen at the base of trees outside or plants, that's usually where feces accumulates, and usually, as long as you would judge based on taste, but usually the dirt or feces, as long as it doesn't taste off, usually acidic or bitter, anything white would be a problem, and then anything that makes your lips pucker, so that kind of astringency, any of those, or burn or numb, those are off signs, like do not do it. But otherwise, depending on where you are, risk reward, that is how you would get other animal feces, which, again, regardless of the animal, contain from anywhere from worms or termites, which termites do practice coprophagia, as well as like elephants or dogs would both practice coprophagia also. They will have plenty, like a whole, we're talking thousands, usually it's at least 10,000 species in there. So yeah, low and slow, taste, smell, to not get pathogenic microbes. I have eaten dirt over the last 2 days, and again, nothing bad gastrointestinally. In fact, if anything, it's been better gastrointestinally, just very small amounts. And it's different from wood, because wood tastes kind of musty, and that warrants a spit out. But if you have dirt, then that could contain, and very likely does, especially at the base of the plant, and if it's wet, when there's water, I think there's a magnitude greater chance that there's feces there, just because of how animals, or where animals go to the restroom, that's it. And so, yeah, it's been honestly beneficial, in very low amounts. As long as it doesn't taste musty and it tastes like pretty much minerals. It's the best way to describe it. And it's mostly dirt. So laughter laughter again will make parasympathetic kick in. If you're eating a lot of ferments, that brings a lot of gut pleasure with it, which is great. Especially a lot of fiber. This we all talked about, and we're curious to see if this increases or decreases with FMD, and I can tell you this has increased now that I'm on FMD. This changed, not in a bad way. This, I don't know, stayed the same, maybe slight decrease, but again, not really bad, and this definitely increased. Also, the digestion is much better. You're trying out new things. We'll get to that. But overall, I think it's super beneficial, this FMD. Even if you have gas stored in there, exercise does seem to release it when everything else that we covered does not. For whatever reason, maybe because you're moving, but there's something else going on. Exercise also increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor by 300%, whereas even diet, intermittent fasting with all the herbs and spices, you're only getting maybe 160, 200%. So there's something special about cardiovascular, preferably high-intensity exercise if you can get it. Walter Longo's diet is at least 5 days because the intestinal mucosal cells, usually 3 to 5 days, they regenerate, so they replace themselves, and you're in a very low inflammatory recycling state on FMD. So you're pretty much getting these super new cells that are not inflamed, and you're making sure you replace them for the gut, which is the root cause of all diseases. So that's why people go into MS complete reversal, Crohn's, they have growth in their small intestine or colon when they never had before, and it was deteriorating, and now they're going the other way. This is probably why. This is the key. And usually if you have good time on it, so you're relaxed, you're having fun, laughter, enjoyment, the things we talked about, like relaxation, it speeds up this process. So this is the core. Your body goes into autophagy, and then you even multiplier effect with these. Right? Again, alcohol risks breaking laws, and breaking laws gets in the way of any enterprise future projected capital, profits, health. So I'm gonna avoid that. Same thing with sanctioned individuals. That's why usually pre-approval or moderation is necessary for those. Reporting varies per your organization, but usually there's something to do with government. There's something to do with ethics and HR, and there's something to do with your direct specialty. If you are working in a big accounting firm, independence is usually the reason you can't say, write a recommendation for a friend online, because if it's public, it can be misconstrued as you're kind of supporting brand A or firm B. And if you're supporting firm B, can you then audit firm B? The answer is no. So that's where a lot of this is very strict, because you can't really review your own work or anybody you're kind of working with. And then there are certain ways you can check if you're working with someone to see, okay, what work am I executing? Am I executing audit work? If so, can I execute non-audit work? The answer may be yes or no, depending on the circumstance. But usually that's a fully automated pipeline, especially for large organizations that can't rely on checking with a person. They usually have a system for that. Install the bidet. It's $40. It's like an attachment on your toilet. People say it took 9 minutes to install. It works amazing. It is right on target, and it is tap water, but again, it's because we use reverse osmosis everywhere possible from a health perspective, but it's fantastic in terms of cleaning compared to paper. Much quicker, much more thorough. Highly advised. Again, for $40 in the setup, no leaks, just great. This is what we talked about. It's very good. This cramp, as well as we had some sort of kind of jolt in the foot. I think that resulted from the gut being strained too hard. Maybe it was too much work. and not enough EMDR or exhaling to calm the parasympathetic nervous system, and so we started having cramps, which we did then do a deep exhale, and then it stopped. That cramp, like in 10 seconds. It didn't really even start up. So that's good. This is what we've been doing to outside. There on the left, there's a can't move too well, so I use my leg to kind of take from the base of the plant the dirt or whatever. They're like brown and black fragments, and I go through, mainly it's the blacker ones, the smaller ones. I make sure to taste it very thoroughly before I eat, swallow. And again, in the microbiome diversity discussion for optimization around that. So, and you probably do have houseplants as well that you can probably go to, because there's a lot of bacteria, fungi that also have excrement, and it does accumulate around the base of the plants, as well as other animals like flies. So this is what we've been talking about. Geophagy helps because clay and charcoal bind toxins, and there'll be parrots or humans that actually eat certain clay and coal when they're eating other foods that they know have alkaloids to bind certain cyanogenic compounds that will, for instance, in yucca, if you don't boil it, or in things like apricot seeds, they will, if eaten at a large quantity, make you sick and eventually kill you. But some of these, when eaten in conjunction, you take away that risk. So usually the best thing for colonization, you want a post-antibiotic wipe, which is usually FMD or something similar. It takes down pretty much everybody to a level playing field in your gut, so microbiome-wise, 50x reductions in some by end of day 5. It's around there, 40 to 50x. And you reintroduce at that point in time. If you do something like an FMT or that feces transplant, that would be the ideal time, because you're doing a natural, just fasted, antibiotic-like wipe, and then you're introducing, again, just natural, something outside you find at the root of plants. And that will probably be the quickest way to reverse your condition, regardless of what your condition is, as long as the feces is of high quality, which again, most animals that are mostly healthy. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be going outside, running around if they're really sick. And so probability games, especially if you're taking it from natural, non-domesticated animals, which are the ones that probably go like on trees and things like that, you will very likely have high probability of success. So at that point in time, so timing does matter, and that's the best time. Okay. So again, we did, and we found out, but it was so good, the laughter and enjoyment on the gut, that it felt really good. We also had this, which is a very strong pulsating sensation on the gut specifically, and it happens usually when you eat a lot of fiber and you enjoy your food and you have symbiosis from a microbiome perspective, and your vagus nerve is on, so it's like connected in a way that, I'm not saying fully parasympathetic, because there's other things like libido that may not have happened here, that happen later, and I'm not experiencing this now, but I am experiencing a very high libido. So It's not guaranteed, but it does have something to do with enjoyment, laughter, parasympathetic nervous system, and mainly the uptake pleasure on the gut. So it felt great, and I think I had it on the second meal as well, somewhere on there. Usually if you do 1 cup of 32-ounce mason jar, that's around anywhere from 6 grams of protein to 16 grams for root to very dark leafy greens respectively, so there's a range there. And these are some of the ranges you can get for net carbs and calories, but they're mostly very low. This is where we had a jolt on the ground because, again, I think the parasympathetic was not active and the gut was taking a hit. And so now we're up to 2 sticks because of the previously mentioned ALS 2024 global correlation around 700% for reversals in ALS due to carpentry being primary hobby. And so they can't explain it. I'm carrying 2 sticks with me right now, just in the kind of edge of my pants, and that works. Sometimes I hold on to them. I definitely do that during sleep as well. So, but also definitely doing after every meal, deep exhale, left and right EMDR slowly, and that works wonders, by the way. And this hasn't happened since. 2 sheets of nori for pain, even during FMD. Each sheet is 1 gram of protein, but they also make you feel more full. So you don't eat the whole jar, you eat like 3/4 of that, so it balances out. That was the second one. The second stick. This is, so summarized legally to record, transcribe even ephemerally, which means it shows up and then goes away. Like on Teams meetings, you need clearance from everyone in the room, either implied because of a signed contract beforehand, or every meeting you need to say, hey, we're going to record. If you stay on, let's record. There's certain things you can't record, like PI, PHI, anything HR related, clearance data, anything government related, like export control. They have very strict policies around that. And then some finance related, again, anything that moves money pretty much. So others' livelihood depends on it, or the country's livelihood depends on it. You can't. As well as anything that is not meant to be outside facing until after a certain time, otherwise it is sensitive. That's kind of what you want to avoid recording. So if something is releasing it now versus releasing in 2 months is a problem, that's what you typically do not want to record. And again, there's some retention policies depending on your organization, but yeah, usually it's 30 days for most organizations in terms of automated recordings, unless you save it down manually. And then if you're in Big Four, big accounting firms, you have to keep it for a lot longer. I think we mentioned 7 years around, typically. So this is so if your organization, most are doing this through data lakes, kind of AI is really helping streamline this, but anytime you have something very custom, something that's not standardized or shared amongst different components of the organization, that's not good because it comes at a very high cost. And so standardization, there's usually an emphasis on standardization regardless of your organization to drive down costs, and to drive along with that to drive down errors and to drive up things like profits, revenue, etc. And usually the public I'm sorry, with the public is much faster than the private on any audits. It's much more accelerated, tighter windows for setup and for completion. And there is a huge drive now, anywhere from South America to Asia, especially Southeast Asia, to use those resources over American resources or European resources because of the cost, much lower cost. And a lot of times they're very specialized at what they do. So, and then anytime you can cut out a step, that's encouraged as well. Like, for instance, the big accounting firms have entities they have to talk with, but if you, instead of scheduling a meeting, they can look directly into, peek into your documentation and work with you initially at those first steps, you're going to benefit a lot versus having the extra step of talking to them, getting the information, then you putting it. So in anything in life, if you can cut the steps down, it's better. So you can think of Levenstein distance, similar thing for encoding and getting from one state to another target state. The less steps, the better. This is what we did, so slower left and right eye movement instead of faster, even though 6 hertz is the magical hypnagogic. In my experience, going slower, maybe like 0.5 hertz realistically, is much better to get a very flat stomach, deep, enjoying food, reversing trauma. Definitely slower is better at about the pace I did it before in this video. First day of FMD, didn't have any gas, not a coincidence. Trying to do more nerve exercises 3 times a day, they really help. Also resetting the vagus, kind of. This also seems to reset the vagus to an extent. The vagus, it does, so it's fantastic. And you do them spread out, like morning, mid-afternoon, and then evening. So we have started doing a very similar thing they do in Demon Slayer, which is you are constantly focused on breathing all the way in until you can feel it everywhere, like in your sinews. That means tendons, ligaments, muscles, bones, and then breathing all the way out till pretty much you're right before the, oh my god, I don't have air, I gotta gasp. Like, there's a feeling that you kind of, your heart flutters a little bit, and you just constantly do that at night. During the day, extremely hard with all the focus going on, but at night, that actually really helps in sleep. Apparently there they say they heal super quickly. So far, at least judging from yesterday and today, definitely have noticed extreme gains compared to, this one 24-hour period compared to the last 7 days. Yes, maybe have to do with FMD. I believe we're on day 2. But it also, we've done FMD before and we haven't noticed that bump, so it's probably that super, like, Demon Slayer. This was done in Demon Slayer. Okay. Yeah, chunking is fantastic. So if you go right language node on anything, whether it's sleep, you can chunk, whether it's like recalling previous data or learning new things, you chunk. And chunking is, let's say there's, I don't know, something like names, like Anne, Doug, Fred, and Michelle. Well, you can do Anne, Doug, Fred, Michelle, or you can chunk them, and it's kind of like you do Anne, Doug, Fred, Michelle, like all in one go. And the cool thing about that is when you chunk, well, Anne and Michelle are women names, like I'm just, trying to keep things simple. And Fred and Doug are guys' names. Also, you kind of see alphabetized, like Anne, Doug, Fred, Michelle, like kind of, it's almost like you get another, when you chunk, connections just happen. Different types of connections, like almost different dimensions of connections. which for recall and memory, it's shown to be extremely important. The more dimensions you have, the more connections you have all through those dimensions, the more you can recall, and the larger your brain and the quicker your brain grows, and the more stable it is. So chunking is awesome. It is very awesome, and if you practice the right language node, it comes with time. So along with enjoying life, so you gotta enjoy life. Repeat 3 times. Did sleep a lot though, and this helped you sleep deeper, I'm pretty sure, because time passed super slow just in having looked at the clock on the phone or having heard the family doing certain things at certain times. It passes super slow when you're doing this continuous deep inhale exhale we talked about. Probably deeper sleep. Right, an FMD, maybe the laughter as well, makes you try like this vagus nerve reset along with this. There's this other kind of exercise that you do where you release the cervical 1 spinal cord impingement site through a nerve glide, and that's kind of how you do it. We did both of those, which we haven't done in a long time, maybe because of FMD. This is what we talked about. Same time again, that's what we talked about. So basically, summary of all this is the regulatory bodies for your organization again, because things are expedited, you have to, if you're working in a big audit firm, finish so you have a release date of your financial statements when they're going to investors, and then you have to issue, so that reporting date is usually around that time, and then the regulatory bodies don't want lingering items because that usually means a decrease in quality. So what they do is they make it very tight. So usually it's 45-day rule was the standing. Now it's, for private, still a little more lax, typically 45 days, but when it becomes public, it is now 14 days max. Usually organization rules are even tighter than the regulatory bodies, just to make sure they have wiggle room, that buffer to help them. And then basically year over year there should be consistency. If there's not, throws in some sort of kind of red flag or yellow flag in this case, and that needs to be further explained. That is the summary there. And then here, these are the 7 deadly sins, and they all involve hurting someone else or something else in a way, if you think about each of these. And then so it's interesting because so you have pretty much your business. In your business, you have processes. Those processes are related to accounts. And all of that has risks of misstatements, material, potentially, performance materiality, or smaller ones that get to material. And all of those are kind of your condition events and transactions. So let me... that happen on a day-to-day, that build up into the account balance. And again, these are some examples of like a sale and the amount of like transaction events, conditions, maybe larger is a write down because something got in a fire, or bad debt because somebody can't pay, and then a debt covenant because you can't pay. Debt covenant ratio that's above your current ratio to pay. So those are all things where this is like a transaction. These are kind of condition or events. This is an event. This is a condition and maybe event, or condition and transaction. This really is a condition, and all of those have to be noted because as part of risk assessment, those need to be taken into account. And usually risk assessment, it's kind of evaluating and testing internal controls and any other of these transaction events and conditions through substantive testing, as well as inquiry. But usually you want support from the system in hard copy or I guess soft copy in terms of software, and you want that to align with these applicable financial reporting frameworks, which usually is GAAP for US. Unless it's private, then it's AICPA, and then IFRS for international public companies, and for very small, it's tax or cash basis. Because when they report to shareholders, it needs to, whatever is read by the investor needs to be accurate per these, which pretty much make it so that there's no funny business. Like if there's an asset, it's recorded as an asset, it depreciates like you would like a computer over time would depreciate, or maybe like a car over time, you'd expect wear and tear. Eventually you can't use it. That's expected. And for companies that have maybe thousands of or 10,000 cars, etc., a fleet of vehicles, you need that data in a way an investor can see it, read it, trust it, and that's why this is done. And along with the standardization that a lot of companies are rolling out, it pretty much streamlines these processes. So that's that. And this is what we're doing now. And these went back because of mycotoxins, and then these are what we're gonna eat tomorrow. Hope that helps. Let's see if we have anything else, just in case it helps. This is the one we got right here. This looked today, Neo. These are all the videos we saw around coprophagia and geophagia. Awesome. Hopefully that helps you.